So today I was asked to talk about the legal questions of NFTs and blockchain technology, and I will talk about this slightly controversial question about whether can blockchain technologies and NFT in particular make copyright obsolete. And so what does it mean exactly? So two specific questions I will try to address. The first one is whether the existing copyright law as it stands today can actually protect us against the various types of NFT counterfeiting that we are experiencing. And the other one, which perhaps is slightly more controversial, is whether, given that we now have blockchain and NFTs, do we actually still need copyright law? So I will start with this very nice quote from Thomas Jefferson that says, "He who lights his candle at mine receives light without darkening me," which is a quote that he's been using in order to compare the way in which we spread ideas, in which information is disseminated, in the same way as how people can actually light one candle to one another, whereby giving the fire to someone, you're not actually losing your own fire. And so when we talk about information, content, and creative expressions, it is a particular type of good that is both non-scarce and non-rival. This means that I can communicate ideas, I can communicate information to people, and I'm not actually losing the information that I'm conveying. And at the same time, multiple people can actually enjoy and consume the same type of information at the same time without excluding anyone else. And so what we've done is that in order to create this kind of excludability to information good, we created intellectual property, whose objective is to create some kind of artificial scarcity on information by legal means in order to constrain the flow of information, in order to enable the right holder to monetize this type of information. And then the situation becomes even more critical in the digital world because the medium itself becomes non-scarce and non-rival. And so if I have a digital file, I can reproduce it indefinitely. I can communicate it to people at virtually no cost. And so what blockchain technology provides an NFT is this new concept of virtual property, which is not focused on the intellectual property, but rather on the actual creating scarcity at the digital item. And so it creates technical means by which we can actually constrain the reproduction of digital tokens, which represent a particular instance, a particular digital copy of a work. So we can see how we have those two separate mechanisms of scarcity. We have copyright on the one hand that generate artificial scarcity on the content of information, and on the other hand we have blockchain technologies, NFTs, which create technological scarcity at the level of the digital copies. So let's double click into this. So what does it mean that NFTs are providing digital scarcity? So in the same way as with prints or with lithograph, NFTs enable digital artists to create limited editions of their works by creating NFTs, and those particular tokens can no longer be reproduced as we can do with the digital file. Now the problem is, of course, that while indeed blockchain technology prevents the reproduction of the actual token, it does not guarantee that the same artist or perhaps another person will actually create a separate limited edition of exactly the same work. And so the digital scarcity can be guaranteed at the level of the token itself, but cannot actually be guaranteed more broadly on the concept that the same work can always be minted again on the same blockchain or a different blockchain. Now, perhaps more interesting on the concept of artificial scarcity. Picasso famously said that bad artists copy and good artists steal. And we can see how the NFT space actually has a lot of good artists because even though, of course, the majority of NFTs are created by the authors or by the people that actually hold the copyright, there is also a lot of NFT that are created by random people going to the internet and taking some random content that they do not actually hold any copyright on and then recording them as NFTs. And so the way in which this problem is solved today is by relying on NFT platforms, which act as gatekeepers, which verify the identity of the artist, which contractually require, through the terms of service, that people commit to only upload and only mint NFTs of works that they actually hold the copyright on, and also guaranteeing the digital scarcity by requiring them to commit not to mint twice the same work. And so the interesting question that this raises is whether those platforms can actually be held liable for the behavior or misbehavior of their users, and most importantly, if necessary, how or whether they can actually revocate an illegitimate NFT. And so we have this interesting case that happened a few months ago where someone actually took one of the CryptoPunks, created a low-resolution version of it, and minted it on a separate platform, on Foundation, and sold it for 2.189 ETH. And so, of course, these qualify as a breach of contract because the user that actually registered this NFT did not hold the copyright on the work and therefore was violating the term of use of the platform. There is also arguably a less important value in this NFT because the work is actually not signed by the author because it was not minted by the actually original copyright holder, but nonetheless it managed to sell. And so the question then is, what kind of recourse do the original artists have against this type of behavior, and what bodies of law that they can rely upon? And so what they did is that they actually enacted a DMCA takedown notice requiring Foundation to actually remove the NFT from the platform. And of course, immediately, someone took a screenshot of this DMCA takedown notice and minted it as an NFT. And the author actually, well, the person that uploaded this NFT claimed that it was fair use because it was not the same work, because it was a derivative work, because it was a lower resolution version. But the most important question is actually that even though the NFT had been removed, was no longer accessible from the Foundation platform, the NFT still exists on the blockchain and can still be seen through a blockchain explorer and potentially transferred. So the platform can only limit the access from their own interface, but they cannot actually revocate the token on the blockchain. And then we can see the CryptoPunks, of course, have inspired a lot of derivative works. We have the CryptoPunks, the GunPunks, which are generated by machine learning. And then, of course, the CryptoPunks on Binance, which are actually a verbatim copy of the original CryptoPunks, which shows that when the platform actually does not care about enforcing copyright, there is very little that we can do in order to prevent the reproduction of work as NFTs. Another case that is extremely interesting because more sophisticated is the case of the Beeple heist, where the famous work of Beeple that sold for $69 million by Christie was reproduced and minted on a separate smart contract, which was compatible with the ERC 721. And the specificity of this smart contract is that the person that created it made sure that the token ID is exactly the same as the original token ID of the original NFT, and also that the minting address was actually the Beeple's address. So it was minted on behalf of Beeple. And so when looking at this NFT from the platform, from OpenSea, it was indistinguishable from the original NFT. The specificity was, of course, that the person creating this smart contract had added some functions to the contract, which enabled to seize the funds. So even though it was minted to the address of Beeple, that person could actually extract the funds. Eventually, the problem resolved itself because the person doing this said that it was actually just done as an illustrative case in order to display the vulnerability and the flaws in which those platforms are actually visualizing the NFTs without actually checking accurately the different function of the smart contract that they're associated with. But again, the question here is to which extent could copyright help in this case. And the important thing here is that the majority of NFTs, at least, do not actually incorporate the content. The actual expression of the work is not incorporated within the NFT, but it's only the hash or a reference that is then associated to the work at somewhere else. And so because the hash is a one-way function and it cannot be used to reconstruct the work, then it cannot be held to be any type of copyright infringement. And in the same way, it will be extremely problematic actually to consider that the hash could be a violation of copyright, because that means that every using of hashing as a referencing to a work will actually qualify as copyright infringement. And so the conclusion here is that intellectual property laws and copyright in particular cannot really help in this particular type of counterfeiting in the context of NFTs. And instead, we need to rely on alternative bodies of law, such as fraud, unjust enrichment, free riding, or parasitisme in French. And then finally, the last point I want to address is like what type of new artistic practice exists today thanks to blockchain technology and potentially NFT, which could actually enable us to move beyond the existing paradigm of copyright law. And so to begin, just like as a little intro, what is actually crypto art or blockchain artworks? And there is this kind of perhaps misconception that it is enough to take a digital artwork and minting as an NFT and publish it on an NFT platform in order to actually create a NFT, a blockchain artwork, which to me is just as strange as saying that if you have a physical artwork and you're selling it through an auction on eBay, you're actually making digital artwork. And so the question then is like, what is blockchain art? And of course, there is no single definition of it. But in my view, this is when an art piece is actually using blockchain technology as a new medium of expression in order to really incorporate the technology, the programmability within the art piece itself, so that the work could actually not exist without blockchain technology. And so the blockchain is no longer just a transaction layer, but it's an actual part of the art piece itself. And to illustrate this point, I'm going to take the example of this art piece, which is one of my artwork, which is really attempt to incorporate the blockchain directly into the art piece in order to create those so-called blockchain-based life form, which attempt to reproduce themselves and which also, of course, question the applicability of copyright law. So a plantoid, they were supposed to be here, but they didn't make it. But it's basically like a metallic sculpture. So there is like the body, which is this physical instance, and then the soul or the spirit of the plantoid is a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain. And those two components interact with each other in order to ensure that the plantoid can reproduce itself. So the first phase of reproduction is the capitalization phase, as opposed to the pollinization of normal plants. Which is where the plant will collect cryptocurrencies and create NFTs, which represent the seeds of the plantoid, and then those seeds will then be transferred in order to collect funds for the plantoid so it can reproduce. So the way it works is that people can send funds to the smart contract associated with the plantoid. The plantoid activates itself, so it is covered by sensor, and people can touch or trigger those sensors, and the data collected by those sensors is then fed into a generative algorithm, which will then create an NFT, and those NFT are sent back to those that funded the plantoid, and then they can be transferred. So those are the seeds of the plantoid. They can be transferred in the secondary market, and every transfer is providing 10% back to the actual plantoid. There is a point in which the plantoid has accumulated enough funds to reproduce itself, which will trigger the second phase of reproduction, which is the mating phase, which is when the plantoid will try to find a mate, a human, to help it reproduce. And this is done in the very traditional model of a decentralized autonomous organization. So there is an open call for proposal. Anyone can submit a proposition about how they envision to create the next copy. And all the people that own the NFT can vote on the proposition they like the most. And eventually a winner is selected, which leads us to the third phase of reproduction, which is the hiring phase, which is when the plantoid will automatically transfer the funds to the selected winner, who will then be hired or commissioned by the plantoid in order to create a new replication of itself. And then, of course, because it is a blockchain project, there is also a pyramid scheme or a royalty scheme in the language of copyright, which is that every time the plantoid reproduces itself, it's sending a small portion of the funds back to its parents and another small portion to the artist that produced that particular plantoid. And so from a creation perspective, it's important because it creates an incentive for the artist to create the most beautiful plantoid, because that is what will enable the maximum reproduction and therefore the maximum return on investment. So this is the family tree of the plantoid species. So there are currently 13 plantoid in the world, and they keep reproducing in this manner. But the important thing that I want to make with this is that this particular use of blockchain technology actually enable us to flip completely copyright on its head by shifting the focus away from the author as this genius individual that is creating works towards instead the art piece. And so instead of funding artists and hoping that they will continue to create works that we like, we can now fund the artwork itself, and it is the art piece that will then, through its own governance structure, choose who is the artist that is entitled to actually reproduce itself. And this also changed the mindset from the traditional scarcity and exclusivity mindset of copyright law towards a system in which everyone is incentivized in maximizing the dissemination and the creation of derivative works, because this is actually the way in which they will monetize the most their creations. And so, to conclude, what I think is one of the most fascinating and beautiful opportunities of blockchain technology and NFTs in particular is the possibility of exploring new monetization models for digital artists that do no longer rely on the restriction, so preventing anyone from accessing the work and only licensing the copyright to those few that are willing to actually pay for accessing, to a model in which artists, and in particular digital artists, can now, for the first time in history, actually monetize their work by selling unique and scarce and authentified copies of their works without having to impose any of the copyright restrictions that usually will exist. And so, to conclude, NFTs are extremely interesting to explore, in particular because they enable to actually fulfill this vision of actually maximizing the dissemination of knowledge, of ideas, etc., while nonetheless enabling authors and artists to ensure their own monetization system, and therefore to create sufficient incentive for creation that was the reason why copyright was created in the first place. Thank you.